They dragged her onto the stage as the audience snickered. This simple woman, in second-hand shoes, clutching an old violin with scratches deeper than her wounds. They wanted a joke. A spectacle. A moment to humiliate the quiet stranger who had accidentally bumped into the mayor's spoiled daughter. But the moment her bow touched the strings, the hall fell silent. And by the time she finished, even the people who mocked her were on their feet, because none of them knew they were standing before a woman whose music once healed a broken world, and would change someone's life forever. Before we begin, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Tales and Turns. And tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Your support helps us bring you more powerful stories. She stood frozen under the chandelier lights, eyes wide as dozens of faces stared at her with amusement rather than respect. The mayor's daughter smirked, arms crossed, loving every second of this humiliation. "Play something," she ordered loudly. "Show everyone how talented you think you are." The crowd laughed as if it were a comedy show, not a charity gala. The violin in the woman's trembling hands was the same one her father had once saved 3 years to buy her, back when life was gentler. Her heart pounded as memories collided with the present. She had not performed since the accident that shattered her world, the accident that took her father, the men who believed her music could soften even the hardest hearts. She had promised herself she would never play in public again. But tonight, surrounded by ridicule and cruel applause, she realized she wasn't playing for them, she was playing for the men whose spirit still lived in every note. She lifted the violin to her chin, the familiar shape fitting against her like it had never left. The microphone crackled, and the laughter grew louder. Someone muttered, "This'll be good," dripping with sarcasm. The mayor's daughter chuckled, tapping her wine glass. "Hurry up, we don't have all night." But the woman closed her eyes, shut out the noise, and let the world dissolve into darkness. Only one memory remained, the sound of her father gently correcting her bow grip as the sun poured into their tiny living room. Her first note rose like a whisper, soft enough to be missed by those still laughing. But the second note followed with surprising strength, a tone so pure that it cut through the room like sunlight through clouds. Heads lifted. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Something in the air shifted, even those ready to mock her felt their breath catch. It wasn't just skill, it was emotion, raw and unfiltered, pouring through strings older than the stage itself. As she played, the melody unfolded into a story without words. It told of grief that doesn't break you but reshapes you. Of nights spent alone trying to understand loss. Of hope that returns slowly, like dawn after the longest winter. People in the crowd leaned forward, eyebrows raised, hearts opening despite themselves. Even the mayor's daughter froze, her smugness fading as she struggled to process what she was hearing. The woman's fingers danced across the fingerboard, moving with a grace she hadn't shown in years. The bow glided fiercely, then tenderly, then fiercely again, as if she were arguing with fate, pleading with it, forgiving it. Tears formed in the eyes of strangers. The hall, once noisy and cruel, now held its breath. It was the silence of reverence, the kind given only to the moments that cannot be bought or faked. By the time she reached the climax of the piece, her whole body was shaking, not from fear, but from release. Every suppressed emotion she had carried, every unspoken word, every ache she had tucked away behind her quiet life, all of it spilled out in a final soaring phrase that filled the room like a rising storm. When the last note lingered in the air, trembling between the chandeliers and the ceiling beams, the woman finally opened her eyes. The audience stared at her, stunned. No one clapped. No one moved. Not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't know how to respond to something that had touched them so deeply, so unexpectedly. Then, slowly at first, a single pair of hands began to applaud. Another joined. Then another. And then the hall erupted into a thunderous standing ovation, louder than any orchestra that had ever played there. Among the cheering crowd, a man near the front wiped tears from his cheeks. He wasn't part of the elite, he was one of the event's sound technicians. Earlier, when she'd been pushed on stage, he'd felt helpless watching her be mocked. But now, seeing her strength, he felt something shift inside him, a spark of inspiration he hadn't felt in years. Her music didn't just silence the audience, it awakened something in him, something he thought he'd lost forever. As the applause continued, she lowered her violin, overwhelmed, humbled, and dazed. She hadn't expected redemption. She hadn't expected applause. She certainly hadn't expected to change someone's life. But sometimes, the world forgets that simple people carry the deepest stories, stories that only reveal themselves when someone forces them into the light. And tonight, even though they meant to humiliate her, they ended up witnessing a miracle instead. And as she stepped off the stage, the sound technician approached her with gratitude shining in his eyes. He whispered, "Your music saved me tonight. Thank you." She didn't know it yet, but that single moment would begin a friendship, and a journey that truly changed his life forever.